What if I told you that the history of human civilization did not begin with a slow, clumsy ascent from the Stone Age, but with a sudden, violent intervention from the stars? Most of us are raised on the sanitized version of history. We know the Sunday school stories. We see the images of Noah's Ark painted on nursery walls, a wooden boat, animals marching 2 by 2, a gentle 40-day rain that washed the world clean. It is presented as a fable, a moral lesson about obedience. But we are rarely told why the rain came. We are rarely told what kind of horror had gripped the earth so tightly that the only cure was to drown it. We are not told about the genetic abominations that stalked the pre-flood world, or the entities that ruled over mankind with iron and sorcery. Look closely at the mythology of the ancient world. It doesn't matter where you look. The Greeks spoke of the Titans, massive, godlike beings who warred against heaven. The Sumerians wrote of the Anunnaki. The Norse, the Mayans, the Native Americans. Every ancient culture carries the same scar. They all share a collective memory of a time when gods walked among men, when giants ruled the earth, when humanity was not the master of its own destiny, but a slave to beings of immense power. We dismiss these stories as myths. We call them the primitive imagination of our ancestors, trying to explain the weather or the seasons. But what if they weren't myths? What if they were memories? The ancient texts do not call them gods, and they do not call them demons, at least not at first. They call them the IR, the Watchers, and they were not hallucinations. They were fugitives, the Forbidden Chronicle. For nearly 2,000 years, a specific document was suppressed. It was excluded from the biblical canon, pushed into the shadows of heresy, and buried in the sands of Ethiopia and the caves of Qumran. It was considered dangerous, radioactive. Why? Because it answers the questions that the standard history books refuse to ask. It doesn't describe angels as ethereal beings playing harps on clouds, detached and distant. It describes them as military commanders. It names them, it lists their ranks, and it details, with terrifying precision, the conspiracy that led them to abandon their posts in the firmament. This text is known as the Book of Enoch. To read it is to peer behind the curtain of the Great Flood. It suggests that the history of the ancient world was not a story of human sin alone, but of a cosmic invasion. It tells us that the progress of human civilization, our weapons, our sciences, our very vanity, were not discoveries we made, but Trojan horses we were given, gifts from a higher intelligence designed to accelerate our destruction. The unsealed record. Tonight, we are breaking the seal. We are not just reading a story. We are reconstructing a crime scene that spans 5,000 years. We will trace the timeline from the frozen summit of Mount Hermon, where the pact was sealed in blood, to the birth of the Nephilim, the monsters that science refuses to acknowledge, but archaeology cannot fully ignore. We will follow the bloodline all the way to its horrifying conclusion. We will uncover why the archangels were forced to descend not with a message of peace, but with a sword of judgment. And we will answer the question that haunts the modern world. If the giants are dead and the Watchers are bound in the abyss, then who are the demons that still torment humanity today? Forget what you think you know about the ancient world. This is not a fairy tale. This is the entire, forbidden history of the Watchers. Before we descend into the abyss, I have one question for you. Do you believe the war in heaven ever truly ended? Tell me your answer in the comments below, because by the end of this video, your answer might change. The Sentinels of Silence. To understand the tragedy, we must first understand the height from which they fell. Before they were known as the Fallen, before the corruption that would stain the earth, they were known simply as the Grigori, the Wakeful Ones. In the Aramaic texts, they are called the IR, the Watchers. This title was not merely a job description, it was an ontological state. They were beings of pure, sleepless vigilance. The ancient texts describe them as the sentinels of the cosmos, stationed in the firmament, looking down upon the developing world of men with eyes that never closed and minds that never drifted. Their purpose was sacred. They were the eyes of the Lord, assigned to observe the unfolding drama of creation. They were to witness the struggle of humanity, to record the deeds of men, and to maintain the boundary between the spiritual and the material. Imagine, if you can, existence from their perspective. To be a watcher was to exist in a state of static perfection. They were creatures of fire and light, untethered by time, untouched by death. They existed in the cold, crystalline silence of the heavens. From their vantage point, they watched the chaotic, vibrant, messy lives of human beings. They watched us struggle. They watched us bleed. They watched us love. And in that observation, there was a profound distance, a pane of glass that could not be broken. They were the audience. We were the actors. They were the eternal. We were the ephemeral. And for eons, that order held. The sentinels stood at their posts, silent witnesses to history, keeping the sacred quarantine between heaven and earth. There was no malice in them, only duty. The cosmos was a machine of perfect order, and they were its guardians. The tragedy of desire. But observation is a dangerous thing. If you stare at something long enough, eventually, you begin to want it. The Book of Enoch details the shift with terrifying subtlety. It does not begin with a desire to destroy humanity. It begins with a desire to join us. The text reads, "And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, 'Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men.'" This was the hairline fracture in the dam. The watchers looked down and saw the daughters of men. But they saw more than just physical beauty. They saw life. They saw a warmth that the cold perfection of heaven could not offer. They saw the passion of mortality. They saw creatures that could feel pain, creatures that could procreate, creatures that were connected to the earth in a way that angels were not. It was an envy of the flesh. We often frame this as a story of lust, and it was. But deeper than that, it was a tragedy of identity. The watchers grew tired of watching. They grew tired of the eternal silence. They wanted to feel the dust. They wanted to experience the rush of blood. They fell in love with the wrong species. It was a voyeuristic obsession that metastasized into madness. They looked at the daughters of Eve and saw a mystery they were forbidden to touch. And that prohibition only made the hunger grow. The text frames this not as a sudden demonic possession, but as a slow, agonizing slide. The sentinels, who were meant to guard the wall, began to resent the wall. They stood on the precipice of the firmament, looking down into the valley of humanity, and for the first time in the history of creation, an angel felt a want that God did not put there. The oath on Mount Hermon, the conspiracy of the fallen. The desire eventually demanded action, but they knew the cost. This is where the story shifts from a personal tragedy to a cosmic conspiracy. The Book of Enoch takes us to a specific geographic location, the summit of Mount Hermon. In Hebrew, Hermon means the ban or the forbidden place. It sits on the border of modern-day Syria and Lebanon, a high, snow-capped peak that touches the clouds. Here, 200 of the watchers descended. But they did not descend as a mob. They descended as a military unit. Their leader was an entity named Azazel, and the text gives us a rare glimpse into the mind of a fallen angel. Azazel was afraid. He paused on the precipice, looking at his subordinates, and he said to them, "I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin." Listen to the weight of those words. He knew that what they were about to do was treason against the Most High. He knew it was irrevocable. He knew it would shatter the cosmic order. And he was terrified of bearing the judgment alone. So they made a pact. On that frozen summit, under the cover of darkness, the 200 watchers swore a mutual imprecation. In the ancient world, this was the most binding form of oath. It was a curse. They swore that they would stand together in this rebellion, or they would fall together in judgment. It was a suicide pact. They cut their ties with heaven. They abandoned their stations. They bound their fates to the earth. The silence of the sentinels was broken. The glass was shattered. And as they descended the slopes of Mount Hermon to take the daughters of men, they brought with them a darkness that the human world was completely unprepared to withstand. The watchers had arrived. The corruption, the birth of the Nephilim. And so, the laws of the universe were broken. What happened next was not a fairy tale romance. It was a biological catastrophe. The union between the celestial watchers and the daughters of men produced offspring. But they were not children in any sense that we understand. They were biological impossibilities. The ancient Hebrew texts call them the Nephilim, the fallen ones, the fellers. We often imagine them as the heroes of old, men of renown, statuesque, and noble. But the Book of Enoch paints a darker picture. These were not demigods. They were abominations. They were a genetic heresy, a fusion of eternal spirit and mortal flesh that the earth was never meant to sustain. Imagine a being with the hunger of a human but the power of an angel. They grew, and they grew, and they did not stop growing. The text describes a hunger that was absolute and terrifying. At first, they consumed the produce of the earth. They ate the harvest. They ate the grain that men had toiled all season to grow. They were parasites, draining the resources of the communities that had harbored their fathers. But the grain was not enough. When the harvest was gone, they turned their eyes to the animal kingdom. They devoured the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, the fish of the sea. They tore through the ecosystem like a plague of locusts made of muscle and bone. And when the animals were gone, they turned on us. The scriptures describe a scene of absolute horror. The protectors became the predators. The Nephilim began to devour human beings. They drank the blood, which was the ultimate violation of the Noahic laws to come. And finally, driven by a madness born of their own unnatural existence, they turned on each other. Cannibalism. Brother eating brother. The earth had become a slaughterhouse. This was the physical corruption. The blood of the earth was screaming. But there was another poison spreading, one that was silent, invisible, and arguably even more deadly. The gift of Azazel, the forbidden technology. While the children of Samayaza were destroying the body of the world, another leader, an angel named Azazel, was destroying its soul. Samayaza brought lust. Azazel brought knowledge. We tend to think of human civilization, our tools, our sciences, our arts, as the result of a slow, noble climb from the cave to the skyscraper. We believe we discovered these things through ingenuity. But the Book of Enoch presents a terrifying alternative. What if we didn't discover them? What if they were given to us before we were ready? Azazel did not descend to breed, he descended to teach. He revealed the eternal secrets that were preserved in heaven. And look closely at what he taught, because it forms the very foundation of the modern world. First, he taught men the art of metallurgy. He showed them how to dig the iron from the earth, not to build plowshares, but to forge swords, daggers, and shields. He introduced the concept of organized warfare. Before Azazel, violence was personal. After Azazel, it was industrial. He weaponized the human race. But he didn't stop with men. He turned to the women, and he taught them the beautifying of the eyelids. He taught the use of antimony, the mixing of dyes, the wearing of precious stones. You might ask, why is makeup listed alongside swords? Why is vanity a crime equal to war? Because both are deceptions. One disguises the intent to kill, the other disguises the truth of the self. Azazel introduced the art of seduction, the manipulation of appearance, the weaponization of desire. He taught them the cutting of roots, sorcery, pharmakia, the manipulation of consciousness. Do you see the pattern? He gave humanity the power to kill with efficiency and to seduce with artistry. He gave us technology without morality. He gave us power without wisdom. The text says, "And there was much godlessness, and they committed fornication, and they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways." This was not progress. It was a Trojan horse. The Watchers didn't just break the world with their strength, they poisoned it with their secrets. They accelerated human history towards a cliff edge, handing a loaded gun to a child and watching to see what would happen. The judgment, the scream of the earth. There is a limit to what the physical world can endure. We often view the Great Flood through the lens of a nursery rhyme, a story of rain and boats. But the Book of Enoch asks us to view it through the lens of trauma. It suggests that the flood was not an act of random anger. It was an act of emergency surgery. By this point in history, the world had become a charnel house. The Nephilim had ravaged the ecosystem. The teachings of Azazel had turned every village into a battlefield and every home into a fortress. The blood of the innocent did not just vanish into the ground. The text says it cried out. Imagine the sound of a planet in agony. The scripture uses a terrifying personification. The earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. Think about that image. The planet itself, the soil, the bedrock, the very foundation of life, finally broke its silence. It became a witness for the prosecution. It testified that the weight of the corruption was too heavy to bear. The natural order had been twisted so violently that the earth could no longer sustain the life it was created to nurture. This was the tipping point. The corruption was not just spiritual, it was genetic. It was biological. If the infection of the Nephilim and the madness of the Watchers were allowed to continue, humanity, the true humanity, the carrier of the divine image, would have been extinguished. We would have been consumed by the monsters we had learned to worship. And so, the cry went up. It rose from the smoke of the burning cities, from the dust of the barren fields, and it pierced the barrier of the firmament. The silence of heaven was about to end. The archangels intervene, the divine council. For generations, the watchers believed they were untouchable. They had looked up at the sky and seen only empty space. They believed that the Most High had turned his back, or perhaps that he simply didn't care. They were wrong. The response did not come from the earth, it came from the throne room. The text describes the moment the four great archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, looked down from the sanctuary. The divine council had convened. This was not a negotiation. There were no diplomats sent to reason with Samayaza. There were no offers of amnesty for Azazel. The time for observation was over. The time for judgment had begun. Each archangel was given a specific, tactical objective. This was a military operation. Raphael was sent to heal the earth. Gabriel was sent to destroy the children of the Watchers, to incite a civil war among the giants so they would consume each other. Uriel was sent to warn Noah, to preserve the seed of humanity. And Michael, the prince of the heavenly host? He was sent for the leaders, the Watchers, who had posed as gods, who had demanded worship from men, suddenly found themselves facing the true power of the cosmos. And in that moment, the terrifying reality of their rebellion crashed down upon them. They were not gods. They were merely mutinous soldiers, and the generals had arrived. The binding, the darkness of duty, the punishment had to fit the crime. They had loved the earth too much. Then the earth would become their prison. The text details the sentence of Azazel with chilling specificity. He was not granted the mercy of death. Spirits cannot die. Instead, he was bound hand and foot. The archangel Raphael opened the desert at a place called Dudiel, a jagged, desolate wilderness. They threw him into the darkness. They heaped rough, jagged rocks upon him. And then, the scripture adds a detail that is the stuff of nightmares. Cover his face, that he may not see the light. He who had brought forbidden enlightenment to humanity was sentenced to eternal darkness. But the physical torture was not the worst part. The true agony was psychological. Before they were locked away, the Watchers were forced to witness the consequences of their actions. They were forced to watch their sons, the Nephilim, the beings they had broken heaven's laws to create, turn on each other. Gabriel incited the giants to war. The fathers stood by, helpless, bound in chains, as they watched their beloved children tear each other apart in a frenzy of blood and violence. They begged for mercy. They petitioned Enoch to write a prayer for them, to ask the Most High for forgiveness. But the answer came back, cold and absolute. You should petition for men, and not men for you. The door was shut. The mutual imprecation they had sworn on Mount Hermon had come full circle. They had sworn to die together, and now they would suffer together, buried alive in the rocky crust of the planet they had tried to conquer, waiting in the blackness for the final day of judgment. The aftermath, the origin of the shadows. The waters rose. The screams were silenced. And for a time, the earth was quiet again. We tend to look at the great flood as the end of the story. We see the rainbow, the dove, and the dry land, and we think the war was won. The Watchers were bound in the abyss. The giants were drowned in the deep. The physical corruption was washed away. But this is where the story shifts from a history of the past to a ghost story of the present. Because while the flood could destroy the bodies of the Nephilim, it could not solve the problem of their souls. Here is the theological twist that most of us have never been taught. It is the secret that unlocks the New Testament, yet it remains hidden in the margins of the ancient worldview. Consider the metaphysics of creation. A human being is mortal. When a man dies, his spirit departs. It goes to rest in Sheol, the place of the dead. It has a destination. An angel is immortal. It belongs to the spiritual realm. It does not die in the way we understand death. But what of the Nephilim? What happens to a being that is a forbidden hybrid of both? A creature with a mortal mother and an immortal father? A being that was never meant to exist in the architecture of God's creation? The Book of Enoch provides the terrifying answer. When the floodwaters filled the lungs of the giants, their physical forms perished. The flesh returned to the dust. But the spirit that was born of the Watchers, could not die. And here is the horror. It also could not leave. It could not ascend to heaven, for it was a bastard child of rebellion. It could not descend to the resting place of human souls, for it was not human. So where did they go? Nowhere. The text says, "The spirits of the giants shall be concealed, and shall not rise against the sons of men and against women, because they proceeded from them. Evil spirits they shall be called upon the earth." Do you understand what this means? The demons that we read about in later scripture, the invisible, tormenting entities that prowl the dry places, are not the fallen angels. The fallen angels are bound in chains in the abyss, waiting for judgment. They are locked away. The demons are their children. They are the disembodied ghosts of the Nephilim. They are the spirits of the giants, stripped of their massive physical bodies, stripped of their strength, but left with all of their hunger, all of their rage, and all of their desire to dominate humanity. They are trapped here with us. This explains the singular, desperate obsession of every demonic entity we encounter in the Bible, the hunger for a body. Think of the Gospels. Think of the way the spirits beg. When Jesus of Nazareth confronts the legion, they do not fight him with swords. They plead, "Do not send us into the abyss." They cry, "Let us go into the pigs." Why? Because for a spirit that once ruled the earth as a titan, to be bodiless is a state of torment. They are looking for a house. They are looking for a vessel. They are looking for you. Suddenly, the New Testament is not just a story of moral teaching. It is a continuation of the war that began on Mount Hermon. When Christ casts out a demon, he is not just curing a sickness. He is cleaning up the debris of the Watchers' rebellion. He is dealing with the residue of the ancient world. The flood washed away the giants, yes, but their ghosts are still wandering the earth, invisible, angry, and waiting for a door to be opened. The enduring shadow, the unending war. So we stand here, thousands of years later, looking back at the ancient world through the glass of history. It is easy to dismiss this as a myth. It is easy to tell ourselves that the Watchers are bound, the giants are dead, and the world is finally safe. But look closer. If the Watchers are truly gone, why does our world look so much like the one they built? We live in a civilization that is built on the very pillars established by the fallen. We have mastered the art of war, not just for survival, but for dominance. We have perfected the art of seduction, packaging our vanity and selling it as virtue. We chase forbidden knowledge with a hunger that ignores all moral boundaries, splitting the atom and splicing the gene, desperate to become gods ourselves. We are still eating the fruit of the tree they planted. The teachers are in prison, but we have learned their lessons well. And what of the Nephilim? The physical giants may be gone, buried in the silt of the deluge. But the spirits are louder than ever. We live in an age of anxiety, of oppression, of unseen battles that rage in the minds of men and women. We fight against addiction, against despair, against invisible weights that crush the human soul. The Apostle Paul knew this. He looked at the world, a world long after the flood, and said, "We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world." He was not speaking in metaphors. He was identifying the enemy. He was telling us that the war that began on Mount Hermon did not end with the flood. It just changed battlefields. It moved from the physical geography of the earth to the spiritual geography of the human heart. The Watchers are in chains, but their legacy is free. Conclusion: the mystery of the bloodline. This is where most stories end, with the villains bound and the heroes victorious. But the Bible is not a story that shies away from the uncomfortable truth. Because if you read past the flood, if you turn the page to the days of Moses and Joshua and David, you find something that should not be there. Giants. The Anakim, the Rephaim, the Emim, Goliath of Gath, standing 6 cubits and a span, clad in the armor of the ancients, defying the armies of the living God. Wait, if the flood was sent to destroy the bloodline, if every living thing on the dry land perished, then how did the giants return? Genesis 6, verse 4, gives us a chilling clue, a single phrase that has haunted theologians for centuries. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that. And also after that. How? Did another group of Watchers descend? Did the corruption find a way to survive the cleansing waters? Was there a stowaway in the DNA of the survivors? The answer to that question reveals a conspiracy even deeper than the one we have explored tonight. It suggests that the enemy did not just try to corrupt the past, he tried to preempt the future. The war for the earth was only the beginning. The war for the bloodline was just getting started. See you in the next chapter.